Hello and welcome to my podcast, Media and Ideology. Today I'm going to talk about a little bit about Assange and his image in the media on the example of the films The Fifth Estate and Risk. On October the 1st, 2024, Julian Assange, finally a free man, spoke at the Council of Europe, his first public appearance since his release from the Belmarsh prison and after 14 years in total of asylum, isolation and persecution. If he had been almost any other famous or infamous political prisoner, anyone other than Julian Assange, a Hollywood biopic about his life story would have been easily imaginable. The film starts with a press conference, his life story is told in flashbacks showing his ordeals, struggles, high and low points, and finally returns to the conference where a well-versed actor and Oscar contender gives a heartwarming, tear-jerking speech, neatly wrapping up the narrative. The many years of suffering paid off and all is well. Only in Assange's case, all is not well. I am not free today because the system worked, he said at the press conference. I am free today after years of incarceration because I pled guilty to journalism. Without the plea deal, he would probably have died inside the walls of Belmarsh and been completely forgotten after a while. There is no victory to be had here, only the feeling of relief and defeat at the same time. Assange does not victoriously emerge from a courthouse holding a paper in his hand that exonerates him. The shadowy and corrupt CIA agents are not punished. The president does not resign. No such thing happens. What does happen, the mainstream media half-heartedly takes notice of the event as if not to give any more space to Assange and WikiLeaks than they, in their eyes, deserve. The whole affair is best forgotten, since we have more important things to deal with: new wars, new victims, new heroes, and new villains. Meanwhile, in Hollywood, only a few films were made in the recent years which tried to recapture the spirit of the 1970s and 1980s whistleblower films like the classics Serpico or Silkwood, but without similar resonance. Perhaps these narratives are not needed anymore, since we do have social media platforms or the so-called independent media that is trying to balance out the skewed landscape still dominated by the big corporations and what is now called the legacy media, CNN, MSNBC, BBC, and so on. Simply put, when we look for the truth nowadays, we can easily find it on social media. All we need is to be or become a part of an appropriate bubble, and we will be instantly rewarded by the almighty algorithm. Thousands upon thousands of podcasts are readily available on any number of topics, thousands of talking heads wearing headphones, sitting behind microphones, tirelessly sharing the so-called hot takes or spilling the tea over and over again on anything that is currently of interest in seemingly endless rants and stream of consciousness talk, from the newest blunders of Trump's presidency all the way to pyramids supposedly built by aliens. There is seemingly no need for any so-called grand narratives to enlighten us about what is going on in the world, no charismatic actors embodying the exceptional people who fight for justice in order to entertain and educate us. The disillusionment is all-encompassing. The cynicism seems to have become the order of the day. At the same time, paradoxically, it has also become abundantly clear that opinion and belief matter more than in any of the recent decades of so-called postmodernity. It is hard to imagine the suffering and struggle of the people all around the world, in Gaza, Ukraine, Syria, and many African countries, and in fact in most of the countries in the world, cynically dealing with their reality and living their lives with an so-called ironic distance towards their plight. Simultaneously, in the so-called Western world, there is an online war going on for young people of all genders, a war of persuasion, a fight for clicks, subscriptions, and views. People are searching for an identity, for something to believe in, while quasi-intellectual internet celebrities like Jordan Peterson or Ben Shapiro and many others are more than willing to fill this gap and offer them what they call meaning. The dimension of truth here is that the so-called neoliberal consensus of liberal democracy, the political and cultural influence ranging from the times of Richard Nixon's early experiments in the 1970s, Ronald Reagan's and Margaret Thatcher's revolutions in the 1980s, as well as Bill Clinton's turbocharged neoliberalism in 1990s and up to now, responsible for unleashing the most brutal form of capitalism around the world yet, is the system that has conjured up the monsters of today, the so-called illiberal democracy led by the likes of Viktor Orban or Donald Trump, in combination with big tech represented by Musk, Bezos, Zuckerberg and others. Assange's release perhaps marks the beginning of a new era, albeit not a promising one. As we can see from the media presence of the big tech bros, cynicism has long become the prevailing ideology of our times, and it has become increasingly ridiculous to even conceive of anyone taking things seriously. We have all seen what happens to those that do, that is, to whistleblowers. One of the biggest big tech coups in terms of media control after Musk's taking over and dismantling of Twitter some time ago was Jeff Bezos' intervention at the Washington Post, which he owns, not allowing the endorsement of Kamala Harris in the 2024 presidential election just a week before in the name of so-called objectivity. This decision broke with a decades-long tradition of the Washington Post, an openly liberal and pro-democrat newspaper. Some of the members of the editorial board even resigned over this. Their famous motto, "Democracy dies in darkness," loomed large over this epochal threat to press freedom, which the Washington Post perceives as autocratic. Interestingly enough, although they see themselves as fighters for press freedom, the same editorial board took a decisive anti-WikiLeaks stance back in the day. They wrote in 2019, quote, that Mr. Assange is not a free press hero. They wrote in 2019. They disputed him being a journalist and stated that his trial would have been, quote, a victory for the rule of law, not the defeat for civil liberties, of which his defenders mistakenly warn. Consequently, in their view, Assange is long overdue for personal responsibility, mostly aiming at the leaks that supposedly helped elect Trump in 2016. This was the standpoint of mainstream journalism toward Assange at the time in a nutshell. The Washington Post, now over a decade a billionaire-owned newspaper, will almost certainly begin its inevitable descent into oblivion along with other legacy media, but ironically not because of some, quote, weirdo hacker called Mandax, which is of course Assange. The good billionaires Bezos and Musk are actually the ones paving the way to autocracy and demise of free speech in the media. The tragic irony at work here is immense. The demise of the legacy media is going on right in front of our eyes, and it is not simply the new technology taking over, but the media becoming victims of their own ideology. We have also long ago made our peace with the notion that everything and everyone is either corrupted or corruptible. Radical changes in societies seem to only be possible in the sphere of technology every other year or so. We conceive of individuals as a priori cynical and egotistical, therefore incapable of investing themselves in a project for a radical societal change. This stance needs to be rethought, but not by singing Kumbaya around a campfire. Instead, all the differences, antagonisms, and all the quote-unquote drama need to be actively asserted. Truth is not about getting along, it is about division. This is why almost all of the history's real villains constantly invoke unity, all the while preparing for war, destruction, or persecution of problematic individuals. The image of Assange, created by the mainstream media on the conservative and also on the liberal side over the last 15 years has been predominantly a controversial one, skewing the discourse around WikiLeaks from one of the much lauded, even heroic public persona towards the quote-unquote real person behind it, an egomaniac with dubious intentions. Add to this the fact that whistleblowers in general are easily dismissed because they're seemingly caught up in a contradiction, exposing truths by way of betrayal, and you get a highly problematic discourse that serves only those in power. Still, we should avoid the overly careful approach of whatever you may think of Assange or Snowden or Manning or any other whistleblowers, or let us love each other because we fight for a common cause, or to in some other way try to mediate between whichever perceived interpersonal conflict. This is unnecessary and counterproductive since the individuals, the raw material of the media content, simply should not matter as much. Instead of looking at real people, we should, in our analysis, focus on signifiers or names, always already detached as names are from the signified. This detachment is constitutive of whistleblowing as such. The flesh and blood individual disappears and becomes the engaged subject, a notion put forth by Slavoj Žižek through the very act of whistleblowing. This is not to say that the living human being behind the name is irrelevant. Quite the opposite. It is the cheap psychologization and the obscene focus on the individual as content that in the end functions as ideological weapon against whistleblowers. This battle is fought on the symbolic level precisely in order to permanently subjugate the living and breathing individual, like Assange. Now let me turn to a concrete example of Assange's image in the media on the example of the film The Fifth Estate, from 2013, directed by Bill Condon and produced by DreamWorks. The Fifth Estate is a prime example of the ideological fixation on the individual as content. The story is told from the perspective of Assange's former disgruntled associate Daniel, who also wrote the book about his time at WikiLeaks, on which the film is partly based on. We see Assange through Daniel's eyes and delve into personal moments that are supposed to reveal the quote-unquote truth of the individual behind his ambitious project, which amounts to enigmatic figure of Julian Assange doing such egregious things like dyeing his hair white, suddenly leaving a dinner with Daniel's parents, or wiping his greasy hands on his trousers, and of course generally being annoying among other things. The film focuses also on Assange's obsessive nature, secretiveness, and underlines time and again the irony of this enigmatic individual whose main goal is to reveal secrets of others. The film reiterates this psychologization of Assange on Daniel's part and elevates it to film's message. Quote, "Only someone so obsessed with his own secrets could have come up with a way to reveal secrets of everyone else." This faux argument paints the entire WikiLeaks endeavor merely as Assange's ego trip and constructs him as an egomaniac whose perverted pleasure is to reveal the secrets of others. The Fifth Estate therefore plays the game of returning Assange's intrusive gaze and turning the spotlight on him. The truth behind the appearance is what the film is also seemingly after in a cynical reversal of Assange's motto, privacy for the weak, transparency for the powerful, and simply redefines who is meant by weak and who by powerful, epitomized in the conflict Daniel, representing the weak, versus Assange, the powerful in this case. The Hollywood version of Assange represents the power of the egotistic and authoritarian individual that misuses a progressive cause for their own personal gain. In the film, this is of course stretched very thin, since his motivations are reduced to his simply wanting to know other quote-unquote people's secrets and not about devoting his life to exposing US government's crimes. His ambition then renders him blind to the predicament of real people, the so-called assets of the US government in Afghanistan or Iraq, who might end up getting hurt through his revelations, which was later of course proven false. Again, the narrative turns out to be a cheap cautionary tale of not falling for false prophets. The true underlying conflict shown in the Fifth Estate is between this kind of traditional journalism represented in the film by the Guardian newspaper that appears as critical of power but at the same time knows its boundaries. Mainstream newspapers and platforms can publish their pieces and receive acclaim for having published the next Pentagon Papers, once again ensuring the freedom of the press and intersystemic critique. Or, as Žižek writes, the formal functioning of power stays in place. And here is a crucial quote from Žižek about WikiLeaks. Quote, "The true targets here weren't the dirty details and the individuals responsible for them, not those in power. In other words, so much as power itself, its structure. We should not forget that power comprises not only of institutions and their rules, but also of legitimate ways of challenging it. This is what constitutes a real threat to power of the WikiLeaks project, and a point that the fictional and documentary narratives are missing. Its presence outside the regular functioning of power, as well as its formal critique of journalism embedded within the capitalist system and its liberal democratic framework. At the very end of the film, the quote-unquote real mainstream journalism is again being reinforced as the sole vehicle of proper critique of power, while WikiLeaks and Assange stand for quote-unquote extremism, which again can only stem from a problematic individual who acts for selfish reasons. The Fifth Estate draws the line which should not be crossed when it comes to privacy as a quote-unquote universal good, because again everyone has secrets, as they say in the movie. The film also draws the line between individual action within certain established limits and quote-unquote bad individualism, which it designates here as narcissism. The film thereby reveals its obvious ideological stance, the neoliberal ideology of individualism, which revolves around the isolated individual. However, there is a crucial difference. The entrepreneurial individual can be as quote-unquote crazy, excessive and idiosyncratic as Bezos, Musk or Jobs, and is such crucial for the functioning of capitalism and techno-feudalism, even an ideal to aspire to as well. In contrast, someone who truly questions the very structure of that system is excluded, and all the quote-unquote crazy individualism is suddenly designated as dangerous and simply wrong. Assange writes in his book When Google Met WikiLeaks during his time of isolation in England after he had left Sweden. Quote, I became an immovable asset under siege. We could no longer choose our battles. Fronts opened up on all sides. I had to learn to think like a general. We were at war. End quote. This statement should be taken quite literally, as it simply turned out to be true. WikiLeaks was at war in a sense with the government of the United States. At the same time, the media narratives painted a different picture and often depicted Assange as paranoid. What we know today is that in a way he was not paranoid enough. WikiLeaks insisting on transparency of the powerful and cooperation with major newspapers like The Guardian and Der Spiegel, even though understandable, perhaps reveals the dimension of WikiLeaks which is less effective when understood as objective truth and not as questioning of the formal functioning of power, as Zizek writes. The truly radical potential of WikiLeaks is therefore not the fixation on the content, which is the revelations of thousands upon thousands of documents, but the focus on the form, meaning the very existence of such a platform outside of the commercialized or state-controlled sphere of the internet increasingly dominated by techno-feudalists. Regarding the central conflict of the film between WikiLeaks and legacy media, the film unequivocally takes the side of the latter. In fact, the film shows three major perspectives: Assange and Daniel, the newspapers and the US government, even going so far as to show us the supposed consequences of WikiLeaks reveals, a CIA asset and his family running for their lives, and a lower-ranking US government official working for the Secretary of State, personally doing everything to save their lives. Our sympathies in these scenes are obviously supposed to be on the side of the Secretary of State. Thus, the film overall assumes an quote-unquote objective perspective, trying to cover all sides, present different viewpoints in order to show the effects of Assange's carelessness. What it does show in an almost obscene way is the hypocrisy of such a stance. It is precisely when a narrative purports its objectiveness, it becomes clear that it has a clear position, in this case against Assange and WikiLeaks and everything they stand for. Now, the question is if the name Assange can still function as a political signifier, while the quote-unquote real Assange remains irrelevant. For the United States, the individual by the same name is someone who in their view encouraged, facilitated Private Chelsea Manning to break the law. For them, he is neither a whistleblower nor a journalist or an editor. He is simply a criminal. For the mainstream media, even today, the name Assange still stands for extremism, egotism, and even sexism. Such attributes tend to stick for a long time. How then to defend or redefine the name Assange? If we say that he is a fighter, a revolutionary, someone who is at war with governments and their agencies, then he might be treated precisely as such, as Zizek also remarks, quote, the price one pays for engaging in the conspiratorial mode is to be treated according to its logic. end quote. Nonetheless, perhaps it is precisely this stance that needs to be asserted. In his article on WikiLeaks that I mentioned earlier, Zizek further writes that the, quote, ultimate show of power on the part of the ruling ideology is to allow what appears to be powerful criticism. This ensures not only that the ruling ideology prevails, it also creates an illusion of a possibility of real criticism and undercuts the possibility of stepping out of the established framework. The fifth estate draws the line that should not be crossed when it comes to challenging the system. Such representations of whistleblowing and disruption only further cement the notion that in our societies, in fact, no real change is possible because it simply seems unnecessary. In the eternally flexible liberal democratic society, which is of course on its way out as we speak, we are confronted with constructs that serve as deflection, with rhetoric that is somehow supposed to convince people that after all the ideologies of old have fallen, this time we truly can say what we mean, that there are no ideological lies anymore. In Assange's case, we can witness the truth of this. There are endless possibilities until one reaches the end of that endlessness, as it were. The Fifth Estate's intention is to yet again confirm the status quo and kill the idea of any kind of quote-unquote revolution, showing the leaders of such endeavors as simply egotistical. The film tells us that Assange's strategy of a nomad-like life and him being the whole organization is solely for reasons of egotism and potential authoritarianism. What the name Assange therefore could stand for today is the work of an engaged subject that enables us to see the truth of our system, which resides in its very form. It is in the very workings of liberal democracy and its discourse. The realization that we are at war, as Assange wrote, is something we should get accustomed to, and that there is a line to be drawn between us, the oppressed and exploited, and them, the techno-feudal masters in cahoots with politics. In the end, the crucial question is what image will prevail. In Assange's case, we can clearly see how the media discourse almost definitely shaped his quote-unquote shady image. Quite literally, many of images on book or DVD covers show Assange's face half covered in darkness. And of course, a mainstream Hollywood product cannot simply be on the side of WikiLeaks or Snowden or Manning. The Fifth Estate, in a very open way, shows how the liberal societies are supposed to function and on whose side they should be. After Assange has been cleared of all accusations ranging from rape all the way to endangering innocent lives by WikiLeaks' way of publishing, what unfortunately might prevail is still the image created by the media focused on the quote-unquote weird guy Assange. Now let me say a few words about the documentary Risk from 2016, directed by Laura Poitras. One main theme in Risk is paranoia. Many crucial scenes in the documentary, which mostly covers the period of the sex assault allegations against Assange and end with him seeking asylum at the Ecuadorian embassy, depict Assange as being utterly and needlessly paranoid. The fixation again is on the individual and its content. However, the film, being a documentary, enables another level of quote-unquote authenticity. One telling scene in this regard shows Assange in a conversation with the lawyer and activist Renata Avila, apparently in the woods nearby his hideout in Ellingham Hall in the UK, where he was in a sort of a house arrest. Assange appears as extremely paranoid as he interrupts the conversation multiple times in order to check if someone is following or listening in on them. As it turns out that there is probably no one there, the film cuts away to an empty shot of trees and birds chirping. The message is of course clear: there is no one there and Assange is simply being paranoid. This documentary approach of showing us the behind the scenes and thereby suggesting complete authenticity creates an even stronger image of the quote-unquote weird guy Assange, who seems delusional, thinking that he is so important that quote-unquote they must be after him. In contrast to the Fifth Estate, the very fact that we are watching a documentary can be misunderstood as the ultimate proof that Assange is a highly problematic individual, with scenes that also suggest sexism on his part. While we assume manipulation by Hollywood fiction films, and in a cynical manner can say that we know very well what Hollywood is doing, here we have a supposedly direct approach and exclusive access as we bear witness witness to the individual Assange himself instead of an actor impersonating him. This kind of realism becomes merely another form of content that thrives on the individual, which it at the same time constructs, creating the illusion of realness. In this way, all achievements of WikiLeaks instantly become irrelevant as we focus again on the content of a quote-unquote problematic individual. Consider a counterexample, a home video of a convicted war criminal playing with his grandchildren perhaps, reading a good book, or repairing a broken washing machine. These were actually some of the recounts of people who have met the so-called butcher of the Balkans, Slobodan Milosevic himself in private. Should we then reassess their crimes if this behind-the-scenes content matters the most? Here again, Zizek's approach to critique of ideology is crucial. Facts play a pivotal role in an ideological edifice. This is why, quote-unquote, lying in the guise of truth, as Zizek writes, is possible. Even if some of the facts about someone might be true, that does not mean that the stance of the observer is non-ideological. But when they turn out not to be true, the situation becomes tragic. Risk, similarly to the Fifth Estate, takes a deep plunge into content that fills the quote-unquote empty subject and on a basic level distracts us from thinking about the form. The form here being the limitless power of governments and corporations that fade in comparison to the mythic individual, the so-called infinite wealth of inner content, as Zizek writes, of an individual turned into media content that can be exploited. A filmmaker, once a part of the group, similarly to Daniel, that in a way also becomes a whistleblower, warns us about the danger of Assange's erratic behavior in her documentary Risk. To go even further, Poitras even mentions her personal involvement with one of the activists, who was later also accused of sexual harassment. It is clear that when people work together, disagreements, frictions, conflicts inevitably arise. Within that sphere, it doesn't matter how participants in a certain project relate to each other. Nonetheless, elevating this to the level of quote-unquote content, shown also on Netflix and Cannes Film Festival, is precisely what goes hand in hand with the development of media within today's ideology. On the one hand, the cynical ideology today can readily be unmasked, since the act of unmasking per se does not hurt it. The trick of those in power who were exposed by WikiLeaks was to turn the spotlight on this organization in a gesture of relativization, and finally the participants themselves fell into the same trap. We have wholesale accepted this discourse, and with it the belief that we are all on the same plane, similar to capitalists or big tech billionaires who like to be perceived as quote-unquote good and hardworking ordinary people. So Assange's quote-unquote content in Risk, albeit within different narrative context, again serves as a ruse, or as Marshall McLuhan wrote, a quote, juicy piece of meat carried by the burglar to distract the watchdog of the mind, a distraction from the analysis of the form, which is the truly precarious position of Assange and WikiLeaks, as well as the state of journalism today in general. The mainstream and independent media even equally fell into the individualist trap with Assange, and the consequences of that are severe. When the accusations of rape were leaked to the press in 2010, the public opinion that was already skewed against Assange finally felt vindicated, and the fate of the WikiLeaks editor was sealed. Nils Melzer, former UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, who took on Assange's case later on, nonetheless notices a slight shift in reporting on Assange. He writes, in contrast to the gleeful malice which permeated media commentary following Assange's arrest in April 2019, journalists now started to express genuine concern about the implications of this case for press freedom and the rule of law. But he also states that, quote, what is happening in the British, American and Australian mainstream media is simply too little, too late. When we look at the form, therefore, we can see the vilification of Assange, the symbolic death of WikiLeaks, either complete non-presence in the media or reporting that is, as Melzer also writes, tame and lame, obediently journaling the daily events in court. In a way, we are witnessing a pseudo-Shakespearean staging of a character that has fallen from grace and gotten his comeuppance, and has therefore been rightly excluded from the media discourse. While Snowden and Manning could at at least make appearances in the realm of social media, themselves of course also increasingly becoming content, instead of signifiers, names that stand for radical questioning of the powers that be, Assange was completely ousted. The theater of character assassination of any given whistleblower is enacted for us since we enjoy the deep plunge into the quote-unquote wealth of content of the individual. This is where we fall into the trap of the subject as individualized content and also expect that a person should be completely quote-unquote good and that there is nothing about them that might be deemed problematic. We need to focus not on the person behind the name, but the name itself, and even more so on the act of whistleblowing itself. Otherwise, we are in danger of getting caught into the endless spiral of the nitty-gritty details of the mythic individual. Thank you for listening, and please don't forget to like and subscribe.